Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope y'all are doing well. Today we're gonna build this photo upload service that you can see over here. The app is gonna both have a front-end component and a back-end component. The front-end component is gonna be in ReactJS and the back-end is gonna be in Python FastAPI. We're gonna build both of them from scratch and we're gonna use a Postgres database in the back-end. Just to show you how the app works, I added some mock data. You can see we have all the photos displayed over here in sort of like thumbnails. And when you want to add a new photo, all you have to do is click on choose file over here. And that pops up the file browser where you can choose your photo. So let's go ahead and choose this one over here and then hit open. And now this button is active. If you click it, it's uploading right now. And once it uploads, it should go ahead and show the photo over here. So you can see the moment the upload is done, the photo shows up over here. So this is gonna be what we're gonna build. I'm gonna go ahead and show you the code and then start from scratch. All right, so let's see. We are gonna create a new directory. So let's see, we go to dev photo upload service. This is where we're gonna have all our code. So we have our code divided into the front end and the back end. So we're gonna go and start with the front end. In the front end, all you see is we have a Docker Compose file and a server.py. We're gonna delete everything and build them up from scratch. I'm gonna zoom in over here so that you can see it better. All right. So now let's go ahead and turn off both the back end and the front end. There you go. So now if we go ahead and give me 1 second here. All right. So now if I do a refresh, you can see nothing is working. All right, so we're gonna get the backend working at first. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete all the code that you see over here and then start everything from scratch. All right, there you go. And we have a Docker Compose file, which I'm gonna delete too. But before we do that, let's just go ahead and shut everything down. So we need to go into backend and then do it. Perfect. All right, and then let's go ahead and delete that. Okay, so we have a fresh directory over here. Now let's go ahead and start writing the code. The first thing we're gonna do is write our Docker Compose file. This is gonna be very similar to what I built before. So if you want to, you can go ahead and skip this part. So the first thing we're gonna do is go ahead and define our services. The first one is gonna be our database, which is gonna be an image of Postgres. And then we need to give it the ports. We are gonna give it a 5432 mapped to 5432. And then our restart policy is gonna be always. And then we have a few environment variables that we need. The environment variables are gonna be Postgres user, which we're gonna set to Docker. We don't need this over here. Perfect. And then we're gonna have Postgres password, which is gonna be also set to Docker. And then we are gonna name our database example DB. We are gonna give it a volume so that our data is retained. The volume is gonna be called DB photo upload service. And then we are gonna link it to our Postgres data directory. All right, and then we need to define our volume over here. It's gonna be called DB photo upload service. Perfect. And the next service we're gonna have is something called adminer. This is gonna be a UI that's gonna let you interact with Postgres much easily. And we are gonna make it a dependent of our database so that our database spins up first and then we then we start up this one. This is gonna be 8080 mapped to 8080. All right. So this should have everything up and running. So we are gonna go ahead and do a Docker compose up in detached mode. All right, perfect. Now let us go to our localhost 8080. This is the adminer that you saw. We're gonna go ahead and set to Postgres. You can see our host is database, and our username, password, and DB can be set over here. So we're gonna do docker example DB. All right, perfect, we're in. And if you recall, we are using a volume over here. That's why you see the data that we already have. We're gonna go ahead and delete them so that we can actually see what's there in the database. But for now, we're gonna keep them so that we can test our API endpoint correctly. If you wanna take a look at the structure of the table, it's very simple. We have an ID, which is an auto incrementing integer. We have a photo name column, which is just a character. Photo URL, which is text, and is deleted, which is small int. We are not really gonna use is deleted, but we just have it because it's very common to have this in a typical photo database. All right, so let's see now. What do we have? All right, okay. So our Docker file is working. The next step is gonna be to start writing our FastAPI backend. All right, so I'm gonna open my code to my left so that I can take a look at what I'm typing. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and collapse this a bit. All right, perfect. So at first we are gonna go ahead and do our imports. So we need to import UVcorn, which is gonna be used for the FastAPI. And then we're gonna do from FastAPI import, and then we have all our imports over here. We're gonna import FastAPI, of course. We are also gonna import upload file from here. Give me 1 second. There you go. So we have upload file here. I think that's all we're gonna be needing. A few other imports. We need to import Boto3. This is gonna be our S3 client. We're gonna import our Postgres package. That's gonna be our Postgres package. Yeah, I think for now we can just roll with these, and then we can make adjustments as we go along. All right, so the first thing you want to do is go ahead and do a app equals FastAPI debug equals true, and then we are gonna go ahead and run it. So when we run it, we are essentially just gonna do a if name equals -- main. There you go. Then we're gonna just do uvicorn.run, pass it our app, define the host as 0.0.0.0, give it a port. We are gonna give it port 8080 is adminer, so we're gonna give it 8000, and we're gonna give reload equals false. This is not really necessary. All right. So this should have our app up and running. Let's go ahead and create a very basic endpoint so that we know that it's working. So let's just do a app.get status. Let's name it check status. Perfect. And this is just gonna return hello world. All right, let's see if this works. We are gonna run it over here. So python3 server.py, which is the file over here. This is running. Let's go ahead and test it out. So we are hitting the status endpoint running in 0.0 and port 8000. So let's hit status, and this is a get endpoint. And we're getting hello world back. So our first endpoint is up and running. The next endpoint that we need is to get all the photos. So we're gonna go ahead and create that one. All right. So let's go ahead and create our next one, which is gonna be app.get photos. We are gonna give it a response model of list photo model. So we are gonna go ahead and do our imports. So we can do from typing import list. Perfect. And we're gonna go ahead and define our photo model over here. This is gonna inherit from base model, and base model is coming from Pydantic. All right, let's give it the types. This is gonna have an ID, which is an integer. It's gonna have a photo name, which is a string, a photo URL, which is a string too, and then the is deleted, which is a Boolean. We don't really need this one. I'm just keeping it because it's a very common way to store images in a database. All right, so we have that working correctly. Yeah, so this should be it. And then we go ahead and do our function, which is gonna be called, let's call it get all photos. Perfect. There you go. And then the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna connect to our database. So we are just gonna do a .connect and then give it the name of the database, which is example DB. We're gonna give it a user, which is Docker. And then we're gonna give it the password, which is Docker again. And we're gonna give it the host, which is 0.0.0.0. All right, perfect. So this should give us the connection, and then we're gonna create a cursor from that connection. And now we're gonna go ahead and get all our photos with a select star from photo. And we're gonna order by ID in descending order so that we get the most recent photo at the top. So this should execute the query, and then we are gonna get all the rows from our cursor. There you go. So now we should have all our photos in that rows variable. Now let's go ahead and create our return list. There you go. And then we're going to iterate through all our rows, which are all the rows in the database table. And then for each rows, we're going to append to our list. And what are we going to append? We are going to create a photo model. So the ID is going to be row 0 because this returns every row is a tuple. So ID is going to be the first element of the tuple. And then we have photo name, which is going to be the second element of the tuple. Then we have photo URL, which is going to be the third element. And then we have is deleted, which is going to be the fourth element. All right, so this should do it. And once we have done this, we are going to go ahead and do some cleanup. The first thing is going to be closing our cursor. And then we're going to go ahead and close our connection. And then we're going to return our formatted photos. All right, so this should be working now. We should get all the data. If you recall, right now the table does have some data, so we should get all of these correctly. So let's go ahead and test it out. So if you take a look here, we are essentially doing a get on /photos. So we're going to do a get on /photos. We do have to turn on our server again. There you go. And now try it. There you go. You can see we are getting a list of all our photos over here. And the IDs are in descending order. So we have 41, 40. So from bigger to smaller. All right, so we are getting all the photos correctly right now. The next step is gonna be how do you add a photo? But before that, what I could do is show you a kind of like walk you through how it exactly is gonna work. So how it's exactly gonna work is the front end, you are gonna upload the file. The file is just gonna be like a JSON blob, so like a blob of data. It's going to be sent to the backend. In the backend, we are going to store the image in an S3 database. It's pretty much like an object storage where you can dump any big data that you have. So we're going to store the image in a publicly available S3 bucket, and the URL to that S3 bucket, we're going to store in our table. So if you take a look over here, essentially every time a photo is uploaded from the front end, we're gonna give it to our S3 bucket. When you give it to this S3 bucket, you get the URL back, and we're gonna store the URL in the table over here. This way, what happens is the URL where the image has been stored, that's the only thing you're storing in the database. So you're saving up on a lot of space that you would have wasted otherwise. All right, so now let's go ahead and create our next endpoint and the last endpoint, which is gonna be adding a new photo. So that's gonna be an app.post. We're gonna do the post in photos again. And we are gonna return a status code of 201, which is like a new resource has been created. It's gonna be called add photo. Now, what this endpoint is gonna take in is essentially gonna be that file object. So we're gonna give it file, and the type is gonna be upload file. This is important because if you define upload file over here, which is coming from FastAPI, you get a bunch of cool functions you can use to get the size of the file, the name of the file, and the type of the file without writing any other code. So I'm gonna go ahead and use upload file over here. All right, and then if we're just gonna put a few print statements to make sure you know what's happening. All right, and then, so things like this. So remember file that you're getting over here, you can essentially get the name by doing a file name. You can also do a content type. So you can do all these cool things because you defined your the payload that you're getting as file upload file. Okay. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do once this endpoint is hit is go ahead and store the file in S3. Okay, so we're gonna upload our file to AWS S3. It's very easy to do that. We're gonna get our S3 resource and then get our bucket, which is gonna be the name of the bucket. It's gonna be in a variable called S3 bucket name. Let's go ahead and define this over here. I already went ahead and created the bucket, but if you want me to show you how I created the bucket, feel free to let me know in the comments. So that's our S3 bucket name. So that's gonna be our bucket. And then once we have a reference to the bucket, all we have to do is do a upload underscore file object. Now we give it the file, which is gonna be in file.file. You give it the name, which is gonna be file.file name. And then you give it some extra args in our case, which is gonna be our access control is gonna be set to public read. This means whenever we upload the file, it is gonna be available to be read publicly. You don't wanna do this in a production setting if you have a sensitive data. But in our case, everything is public, so we don't really care. So once we do that upload, we are gonna get a URL, which is very predictable. So we can form the URL just by knowing our file name and our bucket name. So essentially the file that we just uploaded is gonna be in this URL. We're gonna do a F string. It's gonna be HTTPS, and the first thing is gonna be the bucket name. There you go. And then we're gonna have a .s3.amazonaws.com/ and then the file name. There you go. So this should be our URL all the time. So it's unique by the file name and the S3 bucket name. So now that we know the URL, we are gonna go ahead and store the URL in our database. So similarly, we are gonna get a connection to our database like we did before. So that's gonna be .connect, and then it's gonna be database equals example DB. Our user is gonna be Docker. Password is also gonna be Docker. And our host is gonna be 0.0.0.0. All right, perfect. And then we're gonna get our cursor once again. And then we're gonna execute our query. So when executing the query, all we're gonna do is F string. We're gonna do insert into photo, which is the name of our table, the columns photo name and photo URL, and then our values. So our values is gonna be the F string, which is gonna be file.file name, It's going to be a string, so we're going to put some quotations over here. And the next thing is going to be the URL, right? So for the URL, we're going to have a very simple, the URL that we created over here. So we're essentially just going to put that in. File URL. Once again, this is going to be a string, so we're going to put it in quotations. All right, perfect. So this is going to be our insert statement, and now we should have the data inserted. So we're going to go ahead and commit and then close our cursor and then close our connection. So essentially we are uploading the file to AWS S3, and then we're storing the URL of the S3 file in our database. So essentially what we're going to have is something like this, where the photo URL is an S3 URL, the name is the name of the file, and an ID is just auto incrementing. So this should also be working now. We could test it out. How could we? Let me just go ahead and delete this. Okay, so this might actually work. So in FastAPI, it's very cool. You get access to the docs by going to /docs. And you can try your endpoints out from here. For example, this get endpoint that we created, you could hit try it out and then execute, and you're getting everything over here, right? So let's go ahead and try to do our, I'm not sure if it's gonna work, but it's worth giving it a go. So for the photos endpoint, if we do a try it out, and then let's choose a photo and hit execute. So this should be uploading, hence it takes a while. We did get a 201. So let's go ahead and check this out. There you go. So we got the create endpoint hit. We got the file, we got JPEG. So we know that the endpoint is working, but once we write the front end, you're gonna get a better idea of how the whole thing is working. So now we have the backend created properly. The documentation we get is very cool. As I mentioned before, we have our status endpoint, which is just a hello world endpoint. We have our get photos endpoint, which gives you all the photos. And then we have a post endpoint, which takes in a file and uploads it to S3 and then stores it in the database, the URL of the file. So now that we have the backend done, let's go ahead, keep it running, but move to our front end. All right. So we are gonna keep this running for now, and let me move the backend to there. Give me 1 second. Perfect. And then we're gonna go ahead and do photo upload service front end. So this is where our front end code is gonna be. Once again, I'll go ahead and delete everything. So right now, you can see our front end is not even running. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to app.js. So our index.js is very simple. It literally has nothing. App.js is where all our logic is gonna be. So I'll go ahead and clean that up so that you can actually see what's happening. Okay. All right, so there you go. Very, very empty app.js. And now let me get our front end code to my left. So once again, I know what I'm doing. All right, so we're ready to go. So the first thing we're gonna do is do our imports. So we're gonna go ahead and import useState and useEffect from React. Perfect. And then we are gonna import Chakra provider. If I know how to type, there we go. So we're gonna import this from @Chakra UI React. Perfect. For now, that's all we need. We don't really need this. Oops. Okay, so we have our app component. We're gonna put this in, what's that called? We're gonna put this in a container. That's the word I'm looking for. So we're gonna get a container component. So Chakra UI is a framework which lets you do very cool and easy UI elements. So we're going to do a heading of hello world, just to show you that things are working. We're going to import heading from here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and run this. Okay, so this should reload and then this should start. All right, so we have hello world. So everything is running. One thing to note is I'm gonna move back to my backend. One thing we did not do is make our backend support CORS issues. Now, because the front end is gonna be running on one port, the backend is gonna be running on a different port. So when the front end is making a request to the backend, it is gonna get a CORS issue because the request is coming from a different origin. So we want that not to happen, right? So it's very simple to go ahead and do the CORS configuration. All you have to do is do a from FastAPI.middleware.CORS import CORS middleware, and then go ahead and configure your app. So we're gonna do app.add middleware. There's a function. And then give it the CORS middleware, and then we're gonna allow origins, which is gonna be star. That means allow all the origins. And then we're gonna do allow. Do I have a mistake somewhere? Right, this is gonna be in quotation. Not you, buddy. You're gonna be in quotation. And there you go. So allow origin star, that means allow request coming from all origin, and don't allow all methods. So no matter what the method is, don't throw an CORS error, and allow all headers too. All right, perfect. So this should make our app support CORS so that we don't have to we don't have to worry about requests coming from the backend. We're gonna move this to our left over here. There you go. And now we're gonna go ahead and create our beautiful front end. All right, so where's our front end? There you go. So the first thing is you wanna wrap the whole thing in something called Chakra provider. This is gonna let you use all your Chakra cool things in your front end. We are gonna give a center component. Let me go ahead and remove this. Perfect. Center is literally like a div, but everything is aligned in the center, which is very nice. For the center, we are gonna give it a background of black. We're gonna give it a color, like a font color of white, and padding of 8. And then within the center, we're gonna have a vertical stack. This essentially stacks everything vertically. We're gonna give it a spacing of 7 so that everything is nice and spaced out. The first thing is gonna be a heading, which is gonna say your gallery. And the next thing is gonna be a text that says, take a look at all your photos. We're gonna import text. And then there you go. So you see a center, so everything is centered. And then the V stack makes sure these two are vertically stacked. And the spacing makes sure that they're like nice and spaced out. All right, so the next thing is gonna be after the vertical stack, we have our text, and then below the text, we are gonna have a horizontal stack. Like vertical stack, but except this stack stands horizontally. And within that, we're gonna have our first input. And the input is gonna be of type file. We're gonna give it an on change. Right now, it's gonna be null. And on click, which is also gonna be null for now. That's gonna be our input, and then beside that, we're gonna have our button. We're gonna import the button from here. And then for the button, we're gonna give it a size, which is gonna be large. We're gonna give it a color scheme of red. And then we are gonna give it is disabled, which is right now gonna be null. Did I spell it right? No, it should be is disabled. And then we have an on click, which is also gonna be null for now. So we have an input, and then beside that we have the button. So you can see we have the input and the button. So the button is gonna be called upload photo. There you go, perfect. So we have the input and the button. If you click choose file, this pops up. So everything is working as expected. All right, so the next thing we are gonna have is our grid to show all the photos, right? So after our H stack, we're gonna have something called a heading, which is gonna be your photos. And all the photos should be in a grid over here, if you remember. Right, yeah. So we are gonna import something called simple grid. And then we are gonna go ahead and do our simple grid over here. It's gonna have 3 columns. And the spacing is gonna be 8. Okay, so now let's go ahead and make the call to the backend to get all our photos, right? So this is gonna be our first state. We're gonna call it all photos. And initially it's gonna be an empty list. Okay, now let's make the call use effect, which essentially does goes ahead. So this is gonna be nothing. Okay, so use effect is gonna make the call. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy paste that code to make things quicker. Okay, so we're essentially doing a fetch on our photos endpoint because our backend is running at 8,000. We're turning it into JSON, the response. We're logging it, and then we're doing a set all photos on data. Okay, so now, of course, I forgot. This is gonna be const, and then you won't be here. All right, perfect. So this should get us all the photos, and then everything should be stored in the all photos variable. Now let's move to our grid. And within the grid, we wanna go ahead and put some curly braces and then do all photos dot map. So for every photo we're mapping, and then for every photo we'll map, and then go ahead and return an image. Let's import image. There you go. And for the image, all we're gonna do is, we don't even need this. For the image, we could just do image, and then, okay, that'll take care of itself. So we're gonna give it some radius. 25 should be good enough. But we're gonna give it a boxy size. So box size. And that should be around, let's do 300 pixel. Now the source, this is where we're gonna pull in our API response. So that's gonna be in photo URL. All right, and then we have a fallback source. This is just gonna be a fallback if the image is not accessible. Okay. And then we're gonna give object fit cover. This is to make sure that the aspect ratio is handled by the image component. All right, so we're essentially making the call and setting all the photos from the backend into our all photo state variable. And then we're going through them and then mapping and returning an image for each of the image in the grid. And you see we had this working. All right, there you go. So we have it working where all the photos are being returned correctly. Okay, so we are gonna go ahead and delete some of these. Let me leave only like 2 of them and then delete the others. All right, so we have 3 of them left. Now, if I refresh, so you see we only get 3 photos. This is gonna let us, this is gonna help us test things better. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is, let's go back to the code. Okay, so we are gonna go ahead and see how you wanna upload a photo. Okay, so let's see. So for our input, we have an onChange and onClick. So our onChange function is gonna be called onInputChange. We are gonna go ahead and define it in a bit. And our onClick is gonna be called onFileUpload. Okay, so now let's go ahead and define them. All right, so we're gonna have onInputChange. This is gonna take in the event. And what this is gonna do is just do, let's do a few states. We're gonna have one for the file that you're gonna upload. We're gonna call it selected file. Okay, and this is gonna be essentially null. And then we are gonna have a boolean called isSelected. This is gonna let us know if something is selected or not. And initially this is gonna be set to false. Okay. And then a few more. We're gonna have one that says upload successful. Okay, and this is gonna be set to false again. And finally, we're gonna have something called show spinner. And this also will be set to false at first. All right, now we have all the state that we need. We're gonna go ahead to our onInputChange and then do isSelected, set it to true, and go ahead and set the file, set selected file. So the file should be in e.target.files, and we take the first one. They should make sure that whenever we change the input, so whenever we change a file, we are setting our isSelected variable state to true, and we're setting that file that we just selected in our selected file variable over here. Right, and we have that, and the next thing is we are gonna have our onFileUpload. Okay, so let's see, what are we gonna do in this one? Let's see, so we do have our spinner. All right, so where were we? Let's see. Okay, so we have our onFileUpload function, which is essentially gonna upload the file. So when we're uploading the file, we are gonna show our spinner. So we're gonna set this to true. We're gonna create our form data. There you go. To our form data, we are gonna append a key called file, give it our selected file, and give it the name too. So this is gonna be in our form data. And then we're gonna make a call to our backend, which is gonna be very straightforward. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy this so that you don't have to take a look again. Perfect. So we're doing a post in our photos endpoint. We're passing in the form data, and the form data is essentially a key of file, and the file is the value. Well, once successful, we have a console log, which we really don't need. Set upload successful is toggled. So if it was false, we set it to true. If true, we set it to false. Set show spinner, we set it to false because we don't want to show the spinner anymore. And the reason we're toggling this is so that in our use effect, we can use it. Upload successful. There you go. I think we got wrong. There you go. What this essentially does is whenever the value of this variable changes, use effect runs again. So essentially, whenever this one is toggled, we are going to go ahead and fetch the photos again. Now the question is, when is this going to be toggled? The only time this gets toggled is when an upload is successful. So what ends up happening is you upload a file, we wait while the spinner shows, and when the upload is successful, we toggle our upload successful variable, which makes sure we refetch all the photos, and we also set the spinner to false so that we don't show the spinner anymore. Now let's go ahead and show that spinner because I don't think we did that. So this is very straightforward. We have our show spinner. So we're gonna have that, and then we're gonna essentially put that in over here, which is gonna be in center, and within center we're gonna show something called a spinner. The spinner is gonna be the largest size. And where is spinner coming from? It's coming from Chakra UI. All right, so we have the spinner working too. Now I think we have like 1 or 2 things left and we should be good. Let's just see what we have. Okay, so everything is kind of working. So we just have like 1 button click handler that we have left. I'm trying to figure out where that goes, because I don't think we need that. So I think we should be good without that. Yeah, I think what we have should be good enough, except this button should be grayed out at the beginning. And the button over here, this is gonna be is selected, not. So if something is not selected, it should be disabled. There you go. All right, I think that should be all. So let's go ahead and give it a go. We're gonna go ahead and delete everything over here. Perfect. This is not getting anything. Now let's go ahead. This shouldn't be spinning right now. So we have something going wrong. So let's see, what do we have going wrong? Where there is upload, cause that is on file upload. Where is this? So this shouldn't be the on click of input. This should be the on click of the button. All right, that should be better. Let's see, choose file, spinner is not going, perfect. And then we have the burger photo, open, and then you hit upload. Spinning, still spinning, and you have it over here. Perfect, it works. Let's go ahead and upload another. There you go. So there you go, perfect. Second photo works too. Third one, upload. All right, and as you can see, you're gonna keep on adding rows to the table. Now the fourth one, which is, what was that food? Let's see, is it like a salad or something? There you go. It's like a sort of like a bowl. Let's keep on and do a few more. We have a pizza over here. So you see, whenever we're adding a new photo, it's going right at the front. There you go. So we got the pizza done. So we have some meatballs over here. There you go. So we have our meatballs. And what else? We have a few more. We have a lot of food in this one. The moment we're uploading a photo successfully, we are going and refetching the photos. That's why you see the reorganization right after the upload. All right, we got some eggs over here. I'm gonna upload that too. All right, bear with me. There you go. So we have the eggs. Do we have anything? We do have sort of like a pancake. So we're gonna go ahead and upload the pancake too. Is it a pancake or like a French toast? And then we have some meat over here, and that should be the last one. Let's go ahead and upload it. And there you go. So it's perfectly working. You get this beautiful grid, which I believe should be relatively responsive. Let's give it a go. Buddy, you go that side. All right. Yeah, I mean, it is pretty responsive to a certain extent, and then it might start acting weird. Yeah, so to a certain extent, it is responsive, but not like entirely. Yeah, so hopefully that was helpful. I'll go ahead and link the code in the description below. You can go ahead and take a look at the whole thing. I did go a bit fast in some of the places, so please go back and look at the code to see exactly how it works. but hopefully this gives you an idea of how to create a full stack application with both your front end and back end running locally. For a quick overview, what we did was our front end was in ReactJS. We used Chakra UI for the UI components so that we don't have to write custom CSS. On the back end, whenever we uploaded a photo, we stored the photo in an S3 storage, and we got the URL and stored the URL in our Postgres DB. When it comes to the Postgres DB, we essentially had a table which had an ID, which was auto-incrementing. We have a name for the photo and a photo URL. The URL is the S3 URL, which is you can directly download photos from. So yeah, that was how the architecture was like. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And with that being said, have a good rest of the day, and I'm gonna catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.